Everybody, welcome. I'm Danielle Pletka. I'm the Vice President for Foreign and Defense Policy Studies at the American Enterprise Institute. We're pleased to see all of you here. I've discovered that we normally do our housekeeping notes at the end of an event, and that everybody's getting up or talking to their friends or trying to escape the room, and nobody's paying attention to the important thank yous and notices that we're giving. So I'm going to say them right up front while I have you all wrapped. First of all, on your agenda, or on your original agenda, there was another participant in our project, Redouane Boujema. Unfortunately, he had some logistical visa issues, and he is not with us today. He will be with us in March. Second of all, please turn off your cell phones or put them on vibrate. There's nothing more disconcerting when you're speaking than a phone ringing, and we'd be very grateful to that. And last and most important of our housekeeping, again, always at the end, but you can see there are a lot of people here. There's a big conference ahead of us. It's a terrific conference, I think, and one of the reasons it is a terrific conference is not just the quality of the participants we have, but the work that was done by the staff here at AEI. And so I want to very quickly say thank you, not just to Michael Rubin, who's done so much of the scholarly work here, but to Suzanne Gershowitz, to Molly McHugh, and to Rachel Hoff, who really made this happen and made it happen smoothly. So, now, then you can run away freely at the end. Now, I'd like to open up on the substance of our event. The President has done a great deal in the last few years to talk about his freedom agenda in the Middle East, the spread of democracy, the end to a half a century of status quo politics. He's made it the hallmark of his presidency, and I think that the United States has put an enormous amount of political capital into actually promoting this policy throughout the Middle East. What are the real building blocks of democracy? I hope that, Iraq notwithstanding, it is clear that the building blocks of democracy and the seeds of liberty, political and economic reform in the Middle East are not within the 82nd Airborne or any other part of the U.S. military or our coalition allies in Iraq. They are among the people of the Middle East, people of the Arab world who live there, who suffer under tyranny, who don't prosper under dictatorship, who are stifled. They are the ones who are fighting every single day for a better region for themselves, for better circumstances at home, for change of government, for the kind of liberties that we truly take for granted, the kind of liberties that enable us to sit up here and have these kinds of discussions every week. What I'd like to do is tell you a little bit very quickly about the project that AEI is proud to host on dissent and reform in the Middle East. About a year and a half ago, we brought together a group of established senior activists and reformists from throughout the Arab world to talk about how to promote a reform agenda from within the region that would have credibility in the region and that would have credibility in the United States and in the West. They, in their turn, helped identify people from within their own countries who they felt were doing seminal work on a whole variety of issues, not just attending rallies, not just forming political parties, but journalists, reformists, economists, politicians. The one thing that all of them have in common is an enormous moral, intellectual, and personal courage. Not all of the people who agreed to participate agree with everything that you will hear up from this podium. Not all of them are neoconservatives. They are people from a whole variety of walks of life and a whole set of different political views. The one thing that they advocate, all of them, is reform. And what we have asked of them in exchange for this visit to the United States is that they write for their own country a reform agenda that doesn't talk about how bad the neighbors are, that doesn't talk about the importance of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but that talks about specific recipes for reform at home. And they were able to choose. Were they going to write about religious freedom, intellectual reform, political reform, press freedom? Their essays are available to you. They're going to be talking about their own issues and their own priorities. Their essays appear in Arabic and in English. This is the first group of people that have come as part of this project. They are from North Africa and from Yemen. Don't ask why from North Africa and Yemen. The next group will be mostly from the Levant. They'll be coming at the end of March. They do a fantastic job. They have had a series of important meetings here in the United States, the State Department, the Pentagon, on Capitol Hill. They've met with some of the most senior journalists in town, some of whom are with us today. It's really an opportunity for them to hear from us, but mostly for us to hear from them, what their priorities are for change in the region. To introduce them is, what did you say I should say? Just a good friend. Is a very good friend, and somebody who I'm very proud to know, Dr. Saad Eddin Ibrahim. Dr. Ibrahim is the founder of the Ibn Khaldun Center for Development Studies, which is based in Cairo. The Ibn Khaldun Center is focused on democratization and the role of civil society organizations. They've been instrumental, for example, most recently in training monitors for the Egyptian elections, but they do so much more. In July of 2002, Dr. Ibrahim and 4 of his colleagues were sentenced to harsh prison terms in Egypt for their work on voter education and election monitoring. He was recently released by the Egyptian High Court, partly through the intervention of the Bush administration and the willingness of the administration to actually withhold funds from the government of Egypt until he was released. Their persecution caused a very heavy toll on them personally, but it is a tribute to their courage that Dr. Ibrahim has not in any way flagged, has not in any way diminished his ardor for the causes that he believes in. And I can think of no better person to introduce some of the people who we hope will be the founding fathers of democratic revolution in their own countries today. So without further ado, Dr. Ibrahim. Very much. It's up here. Special order if you need it right there.
Good morning. Thank you, Danielle, for a very generous introduction. And thank you all for coming this morning to share with us some of our thoughts, to hear about our problems, to hear about the challenges ahead of us in one of the most troubled regions of the world. Let me start on an optimistic note, and that is a review of the year 2005. Very quick review. Delights me that the region, in fact, has moved forward, slowly, but definitely forward. The year started with an election in Palestine, and the year ended, the year 2005, ended also with another election in Palestine. And the new year will actually, 2006, will start again with another election in Palestine. So the year 2005 is marked by elections. It is a year of elections. We had 2 of them in Palestine, 3 of them actually, and we have 3 of them in Iraq, and we have 2 of them in Egypt, and we had 2 of them in Lebanon. So 2005 was unusually heavy with elections. Does this amount to having a spring of freedom in the Arab world? Not quite. But there are whiffs of a spring of freedom. It's ironic to talk about spring here in the winter of Washington, but nevertheless, there is something going on in the Middle East, and it is something real. Our region, with all the deserts that exists, is known also for the phenomena of mirages. And whether it is spring or a mirage is yet to be determined. But we, my colleagues here, are on the forefront fighting for human rights and for democracy. We are determined to make it a spring of freedom in the Arab world. Let me say more than that. 2005 was a year of elections. In Palestine, things are moving forward with setbacks here and there, especially in Gaza. And now, with the illness of Prime Minister Sharon, things are in the balance. Very few Arabs had ever thought they will be saddened by the deteriorating health of this man. His image in the Arab world for years was a demonized image. And yet, part of 2005 is that even that man, who was universally disliked or hated in the Arab world, began to look forward to his moves toward reconciling the tragic Arab-Palestinian conflict. So Palestine is on the move with occasional setbacks, especially in Gaza. Iraq is another country on the move despite the bloodshed. Again, as I said, 3 elections in 1 year. The Sunni Arab Iraqi Muslims are coming to the fold with their colleagues, Kurds and Shiite. And even though it is yet too early to say that they are finally making their peace and getting their country back together, but the signs so far are quite good. Lebanon, probably a net gainer with very few setbacks, except the assassinations of some of the prominent public figures of that country. But Lebanon is finally free of their neighbors' occupation, and free to resume its democratic march. Egypt, my country, a pivotal country in the region, has also made some gains. But the biggest gain of them all is that the barrier of fear in Egypt has broken. People are no longer afraid of the autocracy, the dictatorship of Hosni Mubarak and his regime. People are speaking out, are criticizing the regime with less fear than they ever had. This is very important, breaking down the barrier of fear. Egypt still has a long way to go, but again, 2005 was a very important year for the change to come. Even in some of the political backwaters of the region, political backwater, like Saudi Arabia, some of the Gulf countries are also on the move. Saudi Arabia has made some interesting and important moves towards opening up their system, freeing some of the human rights advocates who had been imprisoned for some time and who dared to challenge the ruling regime at the price or at the expense of being beheaded. But they were very courageous, and these are people that I hope will be part of this program that the American Enterprise Institute is sponsoring and for which we are all grateful. Saudi Arabia, Kuwait has made, and of course would you listen to one of my Kuwaiti human rights defender, one of the bravest women in Kuwait, Rola and she will tell you about their gains, but also about the problems and challenges ahead. So Kuwait finally has granted an overdue right to its women, the right to have, to vote, to run for office, and Rola is running for office, and we look all forward to working for her as campaigners. Even the state of Qatar, who is known to you as a home of Al Jazeera, but now they have a constitution, a step forward also toward turning that country into a constitutional monarchy. So these are things happened in the year 2005. There are a few other things that happened in the year before, in the outer rim of the Arab world, in Morocco, in Bahrain, in Jordan, and so on, but that is not the time to dwell on these. What I want to say is that these gains of the year 2005 are still in the baby stage. And we could have setbacks in our region. And we have had many setbacks in the past. And therefore, the challenge for us as human rights defenders, as democracy advocates, my colleagues, each one will give his perspective, starting with his own country. We need your goodwill. We need your support. We need you to stand by us. Until a year ago, whenever I came to Washington, in the Bush administration, the code word was a war on terror. This year, this visit at least, and I heard it again from Daniela, it is a war of ideas, the war of ideas, which is a welcome change in Washington, to move from the discourse of the war on terror to the discourse of the war of ideas, because really that's what the battle is all about. Let me summarize what the battle is for us as human rights advocates, and see, and I hope you will tell us whether you can help in that. Summarize our struggle as a three-way struggle. We have had autocrats in our region, 50 years or more of autocracy in many of our countries, actually nearly all of our countries, who in due course generated their mirror image. Theocrats, the Khomeinis, the Bin Ladens, the Zawahiri, the Zarqawis. So beside the Mubarak, the Ben Ali, the Gaddafi, and all of these autocrats, you have generated by default a mirror image, the theocrats, who are challenging the autocrats, but who also are participating with the autocrats in an unholy, unintentional alliance to squeeze and to crush the budding Democrats, people like us. So we are under fierce assaults, not only from the Mubaraks, the Gaddafis, the Ben Alis, who are putting us behind bars, but also the defamation, the accusation by the theocrats of who we are, decadent liberals, stooges of the West, clients of America, who are bringing these strange ideas, preparing for further American tanks and planes to invade our countries and to exploit our resources. We know this is not totally true, and yet It is an uphill battle for us to be fighting our autocrats, who are your friends, American friends, on the one hand, and to be warding off the theocrats, who are morally, spiritually trying to crush us as well. So that is really the challenge ahead of us, of you, of the world. Because our battle is your battle. Our region is a very vital region for reasons that you all know. Our region has, in the last 50 years, witnessed at least 10 armed intervention by the United States. The older guys among you would remember the Marines in 1958 in Lebanon. From that time on, there has been at least 10 intervention, armed intervention, for one reason or another. From Somalia to Iran to Libya to Lebanon again to Iraq to Kuwait, you count them, 10 times. So American blood, our blood, your resources, our resources, have been entangled, seeped, depleted by continuous, protracted conflicts, struggles, Arab-Israeli struggle, Gulf struggles, wars here and there, civil wars from Sudan to Iraq to Lebanon, you name it. So the region is full of problems, full of challenges, full of promises as well. So, but the struggle today is that three-way struggle that I referred to between the Democrats, the autocrats, and the theocrats. The autocrats have the power, have the secret police, have the armies, have the media, have the resources at their disposal, and also have entrenched themselves in the seats of power for decades. The theocrats challenging them and challenge us have resources. They have in each country thousands of mosques that they can spread their message in. So the battle for us as Democrats, my colleagues, people that you'll hear from very shortly, is how to expand the public space, how to have freedom for us to even fight our battle, because we feel hemmed. I am under house arrest in Egypt, meaning what? Meaning I could not operate outside my Ibn Khaldun center that Danielle mentioned. None of the political parties can operate outside its own headquarters. That's what I call house arrest. So how do you reach people? How do you reach a constituency? How do you advocate your message? How do you get to people? Our autocrats have taken advantage of emergency laws. In Egypt, for example, these emergency laws have been in effect since 1981, since the assassination of President Sadat. 25 years. And the emergency laws says, I could not have a rally, I could not have a march, I could not operate outside my building, my Ibn Khaldun, which takes probably as many as, or probably half of the audience here to speak to. Contrast that with the theocrats, who may be also harassed by the autocrats, but at least they have an infrastructure which I do not have. They have the mosques. In a country like Egypt, 100,000 mosques in which they can convey, spread, internalize their message. And that's why in this last election in Egypt, parliamentary election, they did far better than anyone expected. Whereas the secular liberal parties did not. Why? Because the secular liberal parties had not operated as any normal political parties that you know here in the West or in established democracies. So that's the challenge ahead of us. Are you going to help the budding democratic forces in the region? And are you going to help them in a way that does not defame them, label them as traitors or as clients or as stooges? The kind of help we want, three things. First is to stop supporting the autocrats. Simple. Stop supporting the autocrats. Two, give us the tools to be able to fight our battle. Media. We need to expand media freedom in our part of the world to be able to reach our potential audience, our potential followers, to be able to at least stand up to our detractors and to clear our message, to clear our names. The third thing, and this may sound a little bit strange, that I think can help us with, is to engage the theocrats. Stop helping the autocrats, help the Democrats, and engage the theocrats. As a human rights defender, I acknowledge that every human being is entitled to exercise his or her political rights, her human rights, her civil rights. And therefore, I am for engagement, even with my arch enemies, so long as I can ensure that they will respect the rules of the game. And there are signs that they could. And therefore, these are the three ways you can help us, not with planes, not with tanks, but give us your goodwill. Stop supporting the autocrats. Engage the theocrats. Tell them all your fears, all your misgivings, all your apprehension about them, and let them answer them. And finally, try to deal forcefully with some of the chronic problems that so many in the Middle East and in the Arab world have always raised to cast doubt on your sincerity as Americans, on the sincerity of the West when they talk about democracy. I think you made some strides with regard to the Arab-Israeli conflict. I think next is Iraq, and I hope Iraq will be settled as soon as possible, because these are stumbling blocks sometimes in our way, even as Democrats. They say, you want a democracy like Iraq? That would always be a charge against us. When you talk about democracy, oh, democracy, American Iraq style, bloodshed, instability, a threat to divide the country into three pieces. These are the kind of things. So, to summarize my message, we are fighting. We will continue to fight. We must fight. It is for our children, our grandchildren. It is for our region. But ultimately, it is for mankind. It's a war of ideas. We think we can win. We are determined to win. And I hope you will help us win. Thank you.
Can you pass? I want to thank Dr. Ibrahim for his extremely lucid and insightful remarks. But I now want to, and he will remain on the dais so that he can participate in the question and answer session following. First, Mohamed Eljahmi's remarks, and then Neila Charchour Hachicha's remarks. Now, it's with great pleasure that I introduce Mohamed Eljahmi, and Neila Charchour Hachicha. It's too early in the morning for me. I've known both for perhaps a bit more than a year now. Seldom does a day go by when I don't either call or email them to talk through issues, and I've had the pleasure of sitting with them at various meetings and so forth over the last couple days. Mohamed Eljahmi is extremely bold what he's done. While the momentum in Washington is to have a rapprochement with Muammar al-Gaddafi's regime in Libya, Mohamed Eljahmi was a founding member of the American Libyan Freedom Alliance. He's also well known in Libya because his brother, Fatih Eljahmi, is the most prominent Libyan dissident. You may recall that on March 12, 2004, President Bush got up, I believe it was in the Lincoln Room, and cited Fatih Eljahmi's release as a sign that Muammar al-Gaddafi was starting to change. Well, 2 weeks later, Fatih Eljahmi was put back in prison after giving an interview on Al Hurra calling for more democracy. And Mohamed Eljahmi has picked up that mantle, and understanding the pressure that a dissident is under when his family members are threatened, has boldly and very dispassionately explained the impediments to reform and dissent in Libya, which is represented in his paper. Before I ask him to begin his presentation, though, I also want to talk for a second about my friend Neila in Tunisia. I first learned about Neila through her blog. She runs a very prominent blog when you can access it because the Tunisian government is constantly trying to shut it down. President Ben Ali in October 2004 won a Tunisian election in what I would call the Hosni Mubarak style with 94% of the vote. Neila is the founder of the Parti Libéral Méditerranéen, which is one of the unrecognized liberal parties. And I apologize for my French accent. Je parle français comme un vache espagnol. Now, my recent experience with Neila is quite instructive, just watching some of her bold work. In the Middle East Quarterly, which has an article by Mohamed Eljahmi in the current issue, Neila had granted an interview in which she talked about the undemocratic nature of the Tunisian election. The day after it was published, from 2 different sources close to President Ben Ali, I received complaints saying, how could you publish this? Why should anyone listen to Neila? And our response was, and the response is printed and will be distributed, that if you're so certain that she has nothing to say, why are you so worried about shutting down any outlet she has to the outside world? And likewise, just a couple days ago, and this is in your packet, Neila had written a masthead editorial in the Daily Star of Lebanon, in which she took the Tunisian government to task for its lack of freedom of the press. And that was heard in Tunisia. And it's instructive about the change in the Middle East now, that working together, dissidents, activists for a free press, and so forth, can use each other's platforms when their own platform within their own country is constrained. But you're not here to listen to me, so without further ado, I'm going to turn the floor over to Mohamed Eljahmi to talk about dissent and reform in Libya for the next 7 minutes.
Good morning. My name is Mohamed Eljahmi. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk to you about Libya. For 30, as you have probably have surmised, for 36 years, Gaddafi has denied the right to dissent and expression of opinion for Libyans. In fact, he punished severely all those who dissent or dare to speak out. 7 months ago, journalist Dif al-Ghazal was murdered by Gaddafi death squad in Benghazi because Dif al-Ghazal dared to talk about corruption. Thank you. Talk about corruption within Libya and within the Gaddafi system. Journalist Abdulrazak al-Mansouri has been in detention for the past year. My brother Saad Eddin was rearrested 2 years ago for speaking for the creation of free civil society and the constitution in Libya. 1,200 prisoners in 1996, 1,200 prisoners of conscience were collectively massacred by Gaddafi and by order of Gaddafi. Gaddafi's brother-in-law, Abdullah Sanusi, is the one who carried that. That's called the Buslim prison massacre. The Buslim prison massacre, Buslim is a notorious prison. Is the Abu Ghraib under Saddam, similar. The prisoners, all they did was they protested, being held for years without charges, and the poor prison conditions that they're being held under. Libyan dissident Mansour Hachicha, who was a month away from being a citizen of the US, earning his citizenship, was kidnapped in Egypt with the aid of the Egyptian regime and handed over to Libya, where we don't know until today, since 1993, 13 years later, we don't know the fate of Mansour Hachicha. So what are the impediments for dissent in Libya? Politically, Gaddafi has created a hierarchy of organization to enforce his will and force dependence of the individual upon the state, while Gaddafi retains all the budgetary power and the legislating power. He created a revolutionary committee to punish dissenters in Libya and abroad. There were examples, there were death squads that went even Washington, in the US here. When Gaddafi had an embassy in Washington, a Libyan dissident there was an attempt to assassinate a Libyan dissident in 1980. Economically, he confiscated private businesses and nationalized private properties. He capped the income of the Libyan citizens via imposing Law 15. Since 1981, the income of Libyans are the same. Essentially, he's creating a totalitarian rentier state. He tied the fulfillment of each Libyan individual to their loyalty to the Gaddafi machine of oppression and terror. Up to 20% of the Libyans work in surveillance. That's according to US State Department reports. Judicially, peaceful dissent, assembly, creation or belonging to a political party are crimes punishable by death. He imposed the law of collective punishment, where entire regions or cities are punished for the wrongdoing of one single individual. We hear that he canceled the exceptional courts and the people's courts, which he created shortly after the coup. But all he did is he shifted the jurisdiction of these crimes to the criminal courts. He used religion to intimidate his opponents and further his rule. He's a messianic megalomaniac who wrapped himself in the symbolism of Muhammad, Jesus, and even Abraham. Now, what has happened since the US rapprochement in Libya? He has gradually removed subsidies, but Law 15 is still enforced and in order. All the anti-dissent and reform and laws that they spoke about are still enforced. So under this condition, what you have for Libyan youths who comprise most of the population, they have three options. Either join Gaddafi's security forces, get engaged in drugs or prostitution, or become disenchanted and join jihadist movements. Using the war on terrorism as a crutch, Gaddafi is trying to hire 200,000 more security personnel. Despite being cited by President Bush My brother's furlough was short-lived, and Gaddafi has rearrested him. So for 2 years, Fathi has been in detention. They tried to burn down his house and kill his family. They confiscated their businesses. They have systematically harassed the family, only because Fathi has spoken out for reform. Gaddafi is saying that you can go to the Basic People's Conference and speak about reform. Well, Fathi Eljahmi had gone to the Basic People's Congress and spoke for reform, and peacefully. Now, Gaddafi has become so confident and so secure that he's been exempted by the US. That last Sunday he called for the US to abandon its democratic system and become a Jamahiriya like his. And he said that on an American TV station, Al Hurra. There's lack of persistent pressure, public pressure, by the US for Libyan dissidents. There's no reason for us to speak about the murder of Lebanese journalist Samir Qasir, but not about Daif al-Ghazal. Disregard Daif al-Ghazal totally. That doesn't help US credibility at all. Now, the other issue here, a lot of people are saying, well, give Gaddafi a chance. He's come clean. He's serious. So should the U.S. trust him? I don't think so. Why? Well, let's look at his history. I believe the rights of minorities are essential to creating a tolerant and pluralistic society that's tolerant of dissent. Gaddafi has desecrated Jewish cemeteries in Benghazi and Tripoli. He ordered the desecration of the Jewish cemetery. Gaddafi has forced the Italian settlers, who are Libyans and settled in Libya, to exhume their dead and take them back to Libya. There is a hateful, to Italy, sorry, thank you. There's a hateful religious message embedded in that event, which he televised live. He's holding the medics, the Bulgarian medics and the Palestinian doctors hostage, and he's trying to engage the US in a clever way in a hostage sort of diplomacy. Now, the policy of baby steps, it doesn't work with Gaddafi, because Gaddafi believes that the democratization of the Middle East is a passing phenomena that will go away when the term of President George W. Bush will end. He can wait out all the pressures, and he's maneuvering and blocking and doing all kinds of tricks to basically avoid that. So the credibility part is very important, and it's at risk. He has denied the existence of political prisoners. Last Sunday, he said there are no political prisoners in Libya. And there is no reason for dissent. Why would you dissent in Libya, he said. Closing remarks, I can only say this. If you are a US politician and you believe that we can furloughs for murderers and violent criminals, and then I can understand why we can rehabilitate Gaddafi. But if you believe in a legacy and you want to hold the legacy, embracing the Willie Horton of the Middle East is a risky business. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohamed. I just want to reiterate that Mohamed's paper, which is included in your packet, is the best guide I have seen to the way the Libyan state operates internally today. all too often when as an analyst, I look for information on Libya, I hear about foreign policy, about the rapprochement between the U.S. and Libya, but there's very little written because of the lack of access inside Libya to how the Libyan state functions and to how the mechanism by which it suppresses dissent. And that's why I do hope that you will look at Mohamed's paper, because I've seen nothing else like it. And before I turn the floor over to Neila, I just want to say that Fatih Eljahmi's arrest after Bush's praise about 2 years ago is really and was meant as a slap in the face of U.S. prestige. It really is. His continued detainment is a black mark for the freedom agenda, and I do hope that you do not let the name Fatih Eljahmi slip from your mind. His only crime was getting on Al-Hura and asking for democracy and multi-party elections. And with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Neila to talk about the situation in Tunisia.
Thank you. Well, after Fathi talking about Tunisia and Ben Ali might seem a saint. He isn't a saint. He is an autocrat, but he has no oil. Well, freely speaking my mind among you is a very important event for me because, first, there is no room for such event in my country. Freedom of speech and freedom of association are submitted to very restrictive laws and arbitrary punishments. Second, because AIE is an American civil society institution that is defending its own beliefs regardless of governmental interest. So I would like to thank warmly Daniel Pletka and Michael Rubin for offering me this opportunity. As I said, Tunisia is an autocracy like most of the Muslim countries at different levels, but we have no room to peacefully bring a civil, independent civil society. While after the war on Iraq, the question that is always on debate, can free elections bring peaceful development to Muslim countries, or should we first pacify the Muslim societies to go through free elections? I don't believe that free elections are the solution, since under autocratic, long-lasting states, the electoral tool becomes a demagogical tool, and then it does not give a democratic response. So we must first pacify the anger within the Muslim world countries, the anger between the people, the autocracy, and the theocrats, because as said Dr. Ibrahim, we are in between. We have to pacify all this, bring some political maturity to all these people, and then we can go through free elections. But there is a condition. We must have a secure political open context. We must be able to speak our mind, to debate, without being afraid for our persons or our families. So, building free, independent civil societies among the Muslim world to promote freedoms and to promote reforms must be our common goal. If the United States want to fight terrorism, they cannot at the same time support countries that produce terrorism. There is something incoherent. Islamism is not a fate. It is the direct result of autocracies. When political freedoms are banned, when there is no respect for human rights, when there is no state of law, mosques become the ground for political dissent, and poverty linked to corruption from the other side become the cement of radicalism. So, not only the United States should put more pressure on these states, but it should bring us much more support, because these autocracies have most of their legitimacy not coming from their people, but coming from the support that they are getting from the West. Now, if we want to move forward, we have a lot of possibilities, a variety of possibilities through communication tools that are available today. I think that internet is on top of these tools. It is a very democratic tool, by the way, and you need to know that I first met Michael Rubin only through internet. And this shows how much this communication tool can be powerful for communication, for dialogue, and for network building. So at the first step, I think that we can, with a very low cost, identify and build a network, a professional network of professional network of persons that can be network that can be composed of persons like dissidents from around all the Arab world, from experts, from journalists, from the mediators, and together through internet they can create a debate. They can public researchers, and then create an inclusive dynamism open to anyone willing to participate. This network can then reorganize and become a think tank. This think tank must be abroad from Arab countries, so we can go around the restrictive laws and yet keep effective. It will be an international think tank. It will bring dialogue between United States, Arab world, Europe, because sometimes when you have the support of the United States and we don't have the support of Europe, we don't go furthermore. So we must bring all the civil societies together. Now, if internet is, come on. Now, if internet has not the impact of a credible television station, the combination of both can be very interesting. Because through internet, we can build the credibility, we can build the confidence, and then through television station, we can go deep to the million of peoples and get our message to help educate them to political issues and raise the level of political maturity in the Arab world. I think it was the ambitions of Al-Hurra, but it failed building a credibility. Yet, it can still, with professional contents, it can still be readapted and have the impact we hope it should have. It can become the platform for civil societies, free civil independent societies, and democrat Muslims, because all Muslims are not radical and all Muslims are not terrorists. If through a very strong support from the United States to dissidents, I think that the autocracies will feel at risk that they might be isolated and others might be doing what they are supposed to do. I think that they will do the effort to reform. Otherwise, we will have to continue our way without them, and we will have to build a freer future to the upcoming generation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Neila. And I do want to point out that not only are there some handouts outside which detail more Neila's ideas, but also in the same packet, you will find a great deal which Neila has written very specific to the case of impediments to dissent and reform inside Tunisia. What I'd like to do now is turn the floor over to questions and answers. But before I do want to remind everyone about AEI rules, which are wait for the microphone and then actually ask a question. And keep your question brief, and we'll have enough time. The room is crowded to ask, to have several rounds of questions and answers before we move on to our break and our next panel. With that, I'd like to, I'll call on you first. Please wait for the microphone, and then identify your name, your affiliation, and ask your question.
Will Amatruda, Catholic University. My question is to Saad Eddin Ibrahim. You spoke of engaging the theocrats. With regard specifically to Egypt, could you discuss the range of opinion within the Muslim Brotherhood? Do you feel there are people within that movement who have rejected violence and would be willing to participate in the democratic process in a multi-party system? And give up power if they lost an election, to play by the rules that democratic societies are supposed to play by?
Very good question. It's a question that probably is on the mind not only of every Westerner who's interested in our part of the world, but also in the minds of many Egyptians. Would the Muslim Brothers genuinely and sincerely engage in a peaceful democratic process? As an activist, as a human rights defender, I'm always willing to give people the benefit of the doubt. I am, as a secularist, and living there, I will probably be the first to suffer if my optimism is not warranted. But I'll tell you why I believe that we should give them an opportunity. One, the Muslim Brothers especially have disavowed violence 35 years ago. And on those 35 years, they have not been implicated in a single violent episode. Two, they have, every time they had a chance to participate in elections, they did, including the last election, an election in which they did fairly well. They got 20% of the vote, and they got 88 seats out of 454 seats in the parliament. Three, they have learned from their like-minded Islamists in Turkey and in Morocco that the way to influence power is through peaceful electoral process. That violence is a dead end. That's the Muslim Brothers. Now, for those who are not familiar with this phenomena of Islamism, there is a wide range of Islamicists, ranging from the Muslim Brothers, whom I just described as a peaceful movement. Nowadays, they were not always like that. And the best analogy is the IRA and many of these groups that may have started violent at one time, but over the years, they have learned politics, the art of politics, the art of compromise, and my hope is that they will emerge into Muslim democrats, like the Christian democratic parties of Europe. Yes, I'm willing to take a risk, and I think that's why I called for engaging them, telling them all your fears, all your misgivings, and tell them I'm not going to recognize you until you show me that you are going to be loyal to the rules of the democratic game. King Hussein did that with them in Jordan, and it has worked. And they are participating in elections for the last, since 1989. So we're talking about 16 years now, 17 years. They have participated in 4 elections, and they seem to be like everybody else. They have their ups and downs. They sometimes do well, sometimes they don't do well, but they are part of the scene. You could not choose your partners in a political process in any country. You just have to deal with them, engage them, and lay down the rules and ask your society to be a witness and to stand by should they violate these rules. Thank you.
Yes, please.
Georgianne Geyer of Universal Press Syndicate. Hello, Saad. It's been a long time. I would like to ask you, there's a growing sort of one school here that says that when elections are held in formerly autocratic countries, that's the most dangerous time because the most violent people can seize power and destroy the hope for the future. How do you feel about that? I'm open on it. Also, if you could say something about the Arab Development Report and its effect, I would appreciate that.
Thank you, Giorgio. Yes, of course, if you have had autocracy for a long time, and if theocrats or radicals have developed as a reaction to that, then there is always a danger when you open the system suddenly that many of the resentment and the protest vote will go to the radicals. That is definitely a risk. I submit, however, given what happened in Algeria some 13 years ago, 14 years ago, given what we have seen in Jordan, which I just mentioned, in Morocco, in Turkey, and far away in Bangladesh, in Indonesia, I am encouraged to say that Islamists all over the Middle East who have chosen to play the democratic game should be given a chance. There are other Islamists who do not like the game. The Bin Laden, the Zarqawis, the many of the Taliban style do not believe in democracy and they would not participate in a democratic game. But I'm saying that once they engage in a democratic game, they do moderate. They do moderate. Human beings do change. And I don't want to dwell on personal episodes, but I have been in prison 3 times. I have dealt with them in prison. I have studied them earlier, 20 years earlier, as a sociologist, and I have seen the change taking place. And therefore, I say I am willing to take the risk.
Yes, please. We'll just wait for the microphone. And the 4th AEI rule, by the way, is to ask a single question.
Thank you. Huda bin Othman, Arab African Center to Protect Journalists from Tunisia. Well, I got 2 questions, one for the Libyan speaker and the other one for my fellow citizens for the Tunisian. Well, Dr. Saad Eddin Ibrahim put it very, very well. He says that like the real challenge in the region now for pro-Western Democrats like yourself is the accusation from both parties as like you are U.S. clients, traitors, and all these sort of accusations. Neila, don't take it personally. I'm just asking you, you said they have your Liberal Party. I'm proud of you as a Tunisian woman, but do you think that going back to Tunisia, even if you get, the visa from the government, do you think that you will have your popularity in a population, Muslim population, in which the anti-American sentiment is prevailing? You are accused of being pro-American, and even in your interviews, you're all the time quoting George W. Bush. He's not very popular in the region. I'm sorry to say that. And you have a photo with Wolfowitz. He's less popular than Bush. So I'm just wondering, it's a real challenge for people like you. My other question is to the Libyan speaker. I'm really surprised. I've never heard about something like this happening in Libya. I know I got so many friends from Libya. I don't know why you're not trying to reach the media so people will know. Because as Neila said it, the other Arab leaders compared to Gaddafi are saints. So this is my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Neila first.
Okay. Well, it's true that it's very hard when, within an autocracy, you try to be pro-West, and particularly pro-United States, especially after the war on Iraq. We are accused of being anti-patriot, and we are accused of being collaborating with imperialist enemy forces, while the governments are cooperating with them. So why shouldn't we cooperate with them? Are the governments friends of the United States? Can they say they are enemy of the United States? No. So we can be. I will not use a demagogical speech to go to the people's mentality just to get some legitimacy. I don't think it is my role. I want the people to change this mentality, because this mentality is the result of autocracy and theocracy. So if you want to be Democrat, you should be open to everyone, and people must understand it. You know, when people in Tunisia have a health problem, they won't think to go to Iraq or to Egypt to go to hospital. They would like to come to the United States. They would like to come to Europe. When they want to send their children to study, they would love to send them to American universities. So we have to recognize that and knowledge is here. We don't have knowledge, and we still have to learn. And I'm not going to learn with retrograde forces. They are supposed to go forward. A political leader should bring people, go forward, and not go down to their level. This is demagogy.
Thank you, Neila. And I'm going to turn the floor over to Mohamed. Again, the reminder of the question was, why don't yourself and other Libyans use the press more in order to make your case?
Thank you very much. Thank you for your empathy toward the Libyan people, and I'm glad that I shed some light into showing what Gaddafi is. But in the past 3 years, I've been working with others, other Democrats, Libyan Democrats, we're helping each other, and we're working, and we're trying to work very hard. I can mention a few names. I can mention my good friend Mohamed Bousir. He does a lot of work. He works very hard. He's advocate. He's spending a lot of time. I'm spending a lot of time, and there are a lot of Libyans. We have taken the message to Washington, and we're doing our best. We're doing all we can, considered with the resources we have. But I think I'm optimistic, and at the end of the day, the U.S. will do the correct thing, which is will not embrace Gaddafi. Thank you.
I'd just like, before I call on the next questioner, to raise one issue which has come from several days we now have had of discussions, debates, and meetings. One of the questions which many people asked was, why doesn't, as a fact of U.S. foreign policy, more emphasis be put on protecting the freedom of the media and freedom of access to the media throughout the Arab world and beyond the Arab world? Because that's how ideas can be spread, and that's how the information monopoly, which certain regimes like Gaddafi's can be broken. With that, this gentleman, sorry, in the back.
David Hammond with the National U.S. Arab Chamber of Commerce. I want to thank the American Enterprise Institute for bringing us together this morning and thank the panelists for their perspectives. But there hasn't been any talk about economic reform. And I think it's kind of important to touch on that issue because I have an assumption, representing a Chamber of Commerce, that if you're promoting market reforms, if you're encouraging transparency, better business practices, that tends to open up a society and it helps to drive the private sector to bring in outside business. And one can assume that perhaps that would also lead to greater political openness. I'd like to hear your thoughts about that.
So we first need the freedom of speech to talk about it. How can we talk about it if we don't have freedom of speech?
Others on the panel?
Just let me, there's some question, the lady, about going to the press. Yes, I want to follow up. We have articles about Libya appeared in the Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, all the publications. So we are actively in contact with the press. And I just wanted to follow that.
Do you have any comments on economic reform in Libya?
Yes. Gaddafi will not allow, as I mentioned, Gaddafi has created a totalitarian rentier state because it is within his, if he wants to hold all the levers of power. He will not concede one iota of space to the Libyans without extreme pressure from the outside. If he knows, and he's very smart, he's a good student of history, he knows that if Libyans can go to American companies and work and make more money and earn more money, then they can buy and they can travel and they can gain all the goods, then his base, which is the security forces, will shrink. He just wants to keep it that way. He looks at it as his farm. So basically, he will say to the world, yes, I want open the country. I want to make investment. But the country will be open to the oligarchy and the machine of thugs and bastards whom he runs. Yes, if we can find a way where you succeed, that the economic benefit will go to the Libyan people, not the cronies of the RC, you have my full support, and I do agree with you with that. But yes, we do need transparency, but we only need it with genuine political reform, like the distinguished lady has mentioned. Thank you.
Dr. Ibrahim, do you want to tackle the question?
Yes, I think I agree with you. Your proposition is that reform could not really be complete without market reform. And the question about market reform has been lurking, but also has been used by the autocrats as a bargaining card, in the sense of holding the licenses for import, export, for establishing new companies. And therefore, my recommendation to our Western interlocutors is that make your conditionality for a broad blanket reform. Market reform, political reform, it is basically two sides of the same coin. You could not have sound political reform without sound economic reform. It is a marketplace of ideas, marketplace of political choices. It is a marketplace of goods and services. And therefore, make your package integrated one and make it conditional in continuing your relationship with these countries. The autocrats want aid, trade, but they don't want the third one, power sharing. So make it a conditional. If you want American free market, access to American market, access to American aid, access to American technology, open up your system, both economically and politically. This was the formula in Helsinki back in 1975, which ultimately brought down the Iron Curtain countries and the Soviet Union and ended the Cold War. So do the same formula. It succeeded in the case of Eastern and Central Europe. It will succeed also in our case. It will succeed elsewhere. And it was an integrated package. And we have few newsletters here of our center about civil society in which some of these issues are taken up. So I urge you to pick it up and look at it. Thank you.
Okay, I'm actually going to take just two more brief questions before we take a slight break, because I want to leave some time during the coffee break for you to be able to talk to some of the panelists individually as well before we go on to our next panel. First, this gentleman, and then over on that side. Please just wait for the microphone and identify yourself.
My name is Judd Kessler. I'm a former U.S. foreign aid official and a partner in a Washington law firm. Dr. Ibrahim, one of the kind of side issues in your talk was that the mosques in Egypt are a platform for the theocrats. There are 1,000 mosques, and they are the platform, it sounded as if it was uniformly for the theocrats. My question to you is there not variation in expression within the mosques? Is there some possibility of platform for others? Aren't there people who attend mosques who want to hear a different message?
Yes. Question is important. Are the mosques the privy or the monopoly of radical theocrats? So far, they have. But they could be, of course, shared by moderate Islamists. And there are indications that some moderate Islamists have also taken to the mosques or established their own. But that is still a very tiny minority. Because, believe it or not, the Mubarak regime in our case has been the ally by default of the autocrats. we have a ministry called the Ministry of Religious Endowments that builds these mosques, appoints the preachers, and give them salaries. And in that sense, there is state control of many mosques. To establish a mosque of my own, like the Ibn Khaldun Center, I need a license. I need a license. And these licenses, as I said, are not given easily. I don't have even a legal license for the Ibn Khaldun. I'm doing it as an act of civil disobedience. So to build a mosque, I need a license, and the license is in the hands of the Ministry of the Endowment, and yet the Ministry of Endowment could not monitor the mosque for 24 hours. And therefore, radical Islamists can get in, sit there, use the facility, not only for preaching, but also for other services that help the community, which I have to give them also credit for. So with their religious message, radicalist maybe, they provide services. And that is a very elaborate scheme. And so far, the government has not been able neither to break it, nor to grant us equal freedom to do the kind of things that they are doing, as liberals, as Democrats. That is the struggle.
Okay, and the last question, as promised over here.
Good morning. My name is Radwan Masmoudi. I'm president of the Center for the Study of Islam. My name is Radwan Masmoudi. I'm president of the Center for the Study of Islam and Democracy here in Washington, D.C. First, thanks to AEI for organizing this event and bringing these reformers from Arab countries. I think it's wonderful. And I would urge AEI to continue organizing similar events and also to widen the scope and bring moderate Islamists as well to such debates as Saad Eddin.
Do you have the question, though, because we're running out of time?
Yes, I do. My question is to Neila, actually. I've known Neila for many years, but I'm surprised that you said free elections are not the way, or is not the way to pacify Muslim societies. The problem I have with that statement is that for over 30 years, Arab regimes have been talking about reforms and democratization, and we've been playing this cat and mouse game that we're all tired of this game. And they have much more tools than civil society does or external factors have. And we can't continue down this game of slow reforms where they really can outdo and undo any reforms that they've done in several years. So I think we need some kind of shock treatment, and I believe free elections is the way to move forward.
Thank you for asking that question, because that's one question I had in my mind after hearing your remarks as well.
Well, within long-lasting democracies, the autocracies, there is no free independent civil society. So the only organized persons are the Islamists. And if we give them the electoral tool, it's not going to be a democratic response. It's going to be demagogical response. And this is not the issue of democracy. Giving the electoral tool to people that will impose us Sharia, no. I think that we need political maturity, the acceptance of democracy and its rules, and then everyone with equal tools can go on the ground of political, how do you say, tenafus. Competition, political competition, fair political competition. But we cannot have on one ground the autocracies that have all the police tools, the military tools, and then the autocrats that have the mosques, and we who have nothing and go in the same time together on the electoral ground. This is not fair and not acceptable.
Dr. Ibrahim, you had a response to that?
Yes. This is a very important issue, because even though I understand the fears and apprehensions of my colleague Neila, yet to dismiss election for the time being is playing in the hands of the autocrats. And I would rather take a risk and open up the system insist on a free election, on a free competition, I can demand a year or two of liberal freedom to propagate my ideas. But to say if I have election now, the Islamists will take over or the autocrats will cheat again, that means you are freezing situation forever. You are playing in the hands of the autocrats and the theocrats.
No, I think
I
there
am
are
hopeful.
priorities.
Let him finish.
The priority is freedom of speech. Give us the same fair platform to speak. You cannot have the maximum platform. From the other hand, the autocrats had the maximum platform while we don't have any, and then we don't have the same tools to go through elections. We need first to have a national debates and pacify the Muslim society, because there is anger. There is anger. You know, in autocracies, we don't produce reformers and we don't produce reforms. We produce dissent and dissidence. We have the Democrats in the middle, we have the autocracy and the theocracy. We have first to pacify all these relations, end up with the anger, and then we can go through free elections. Otherwise, it will be manipulation.
I think we actually have a lot that can be discussed on that single issue. But what I'm going to do is say, before we break for 3 minutes, in our forthcoming panel, two of the speakers all the speakers speak English, but for the sake of nuance, two of our speakers are going to be speaking in Arabic. And so if you don't already have your headsets, please pick them up, and we will start in 3 minutes exactly. If everyone could please have a seat, we're going to get started with our next panel. I said 3 minutes, and I meant 3 minutes. Guys, could I ask you guys to sit down, except for Rola?
Michael. Michael.
Excuse me, guys. We actively need to get started, so please sit down. Rola, can you? Ali, please sit down. You're right here.
This is a review, but I already.
Okay, that's fine.
I can ask everybody to get seated.
Then I'll start the introduction.
Why don't you ask people to move to the side?
I will. That's fine. Yes. I want to thank everyone and welcome you back to the second panel, where we're going to be talking about both Yemen, and we have a special treat in which we're also going to talk about Kuwait, because we were able to get Rola Dashti here. We couldn't have her come too close to the conclusion of her campaign because her real priority is over in Kuwait and not in the United States, of course. What I'd also like to do is ask people on the side of the room to move to the center. We'd appreciate it while I make the introductions. Again, I'm honored to be sitting on a podium with Hafez al-Bukhari, Ali Saif, and Rola Dashti. Let me, even though we're going to do Hafez and Ali first, do the introductions, ladies first. And it's with great pleasure that I introduce Rola Dashti. Her full biography is before you in the packet, but let me highlight a couple issues. Rola Dashti, I was in Saudi Arabia last year. And I woke up early with jet lag, went out, got a newspaper, opened the newspaper, and what should I see? A picture of Rola Dashti standing on a podium at a women's rights rally in Kuwait. Rola Dashti is, aside from being a backgammon shark, she is the first woman elected as head of a professional association in Kuwait. And she is running to be the first woman elected in Kuwait in the elections next year. An active campaigner, and not only running for herself, Rola Dashti has been coordinating and aiding the campaigns of other women candidates, not only in Kuwait, but also helping to advance women's rights throughout the Arabian Peninsula. Now I'd like to introduce Ali Saif Hassan. Ali Saif Hassan, I've known for many months by email. You will see his paper about dissent and reform in Yemen in the packet as well. It's an excellent essay about specific items and impediments to dissent and reform in Yemen, which, while many in the audience may not realize is such a key issue right now, it is, especially as Yemen, like Egypt recently, like the Palestinian Authority in Iraq, is entering elections. They will have elections this fall. Ali Saif is executive director of the Political Development Forum in Sana'a, Yemen. He's also an advisor to the Minister of Planning and International Cooperation. He's an independent political and human rights activist. He renounced his membership in the Unionist Nasserite Party. Basically, I just want to say that the Political Development Forum is as close as you can come to an independent space where intellectuals can meet, network, and really exchange ideas in a country where, for example, the Supreme Court head is also the brother of the president, and everything is tightly controlled. I also do want to introduce Hafiz al-Bukhari. Hafiz al-Bukhari is a living example of just how important dissent and reform and boldness is. He recently wrote about impediments to dissent and reform in Yemen and was promptly fired from the newspaper at which he wrote for his actions, for having the audacity from the Yemeni government point of view to actually address issues head on. Hafiz al-Bukhari has started the Yemeni Polling Institute and has been the head of the Journalist Syndicate, although he resigned his presidency of that when Yemen passed a press law which was highly restrictive. I had the pleasure of attending in Gdansk, Poland, the 25th anniversary of Solidarity, at which Hafez spoke before people like Lech Walesa and others who have been through this 20 years ago and really wowed the audience. People came up to him afterwards to talk about a case which is vitally important, but which too many people in the West don't pay attention to. And without further ado, I want to turn the floor over first to Hafez, then to Ali, and then to Rola. Hafez and Ali will be speaking in Arabic, although if you want to ask questions in English afterwards, they do understand English well and you can talk to them in English or in Arabic. Thank you.
شكرا جزيلا. سأتحدث باختصار شديد عن عملية الإصلاحات السياسية والديمقراطية في اليمن، وسأركز على ما يتعلق بحرية الصحافة وحرية الإعلام، كون زميلي علي سيس سيتكلم عن الإصلاحات السياسية بشكل موسع. اليمن عرفت الديمقراطية مع قيام الوحدة اليمنية عام 1990. هناك حرية للصحافة فيما يتعلق فقط بالإعلام المقروء، لكن أجهزة الدولة والحكومة تحتكر وسائل الإعلام المرئية والمسموعة، ونحن في اليمن بحاجة ماسة إلى إيصال الصوت للمجتمع. المجتمع اليمني مجتمع يعني يغرق بالأمية بنسبة 65%، وبالتالي لا يمكن الوصول إلى هذا المجتمع إلا عبر وسائل الإعلام المرئية والمسموعة. إذا ما تكلمنا على الانتخابات في اليمن، ربما أحيانا تجري بعض الانتخابات التنافسية خاصة فيما يتعلق بالبرلمان أو البلديات، لكن الوصول إلى المجتمع أيضا للمرشحين صعب جدا، كون وسائل الإعلام هي المنبر الوحيد التي يمكن أن تصل إلى الناخبين. الصحف بمجموعها لا توزع أكثر من 30,000 نسخة للصحيفة الواحدة، وبالتالي المجتمع بعيد عن المشاركة السياسية في الواقع. يضاف إلى الصعوبة الأخرى وهي المتعلقة بضعف الأحزاب ومنظمات المجتمع المدني. الأحزاب في اليمن ما زالت بسيطة وناشئة، ولا يوجد لديها بنية مؤسسية تمكنها من الوصول إلى الناس وإلى التغيير فيهم بشكل أفضل وإلى مخاطبتهم ببرامجها المختلفة. النقطة الثالثة فيما يتعلق بالصعوبات التي تواجه العملية الديمقراطية في اليمن هي غياب مؤسسات الدولة الحقيقية، غياب نظام وغياب قانون، وبالتالي المواطن العادي لا يجد فرصة لأن يجد حقه سواء فيما يتعلق بالديمقراطية أو حقه في العيش وفي الحياة بشكل عادل ومتوازن. نلاحظ هنا اهتمام بنقطتين مهمتين في اليمن. الدولة والسلطة عادة تهتم بالقبائل، كون المجتمع اليمني مجتمع قبلي، يعني القبيلة متواجدة بشكل كبير فيه، ويهتم بالخارج. فشيوخ القبائل أصبحوا لديهم مواقع في الدولة ولديهم مواقع في البرلمان، وأصبحوا ممثلين أيضا حتى في مؤسسات التجارة والمؤسسات المالية الكبيرة. حينما يعني المواطن العادي حينما يتعرض لمظلمة أو لظلم كبير لا يجد إلى أين يذهب، كون القضاء عندنا ما يزال ضعيف البنية. لكن إذا كان هذا المواطن من قبيلة قوية يستطيع الضغط على الدولة بوسائل شتى. وكان من الوسائل المستخدمة للضغط لنيل الحقوق هو اختطاف الأجانب. فهنا القبائل استخدموا قوتهم بترهيب الدولة بشيء تخاف منه السلطة، وهو اختطاف الأجانب، كون عندنا السلطات تهتم كثيرا بالرأي العام الخارجي وبما يهتم به المجتمع الدولي. في الحقيقة الصحفيون في اليمن هم في الواجهة، وكانوا أصحاب المبادرة الأولى في إيجاد حراك ديمقراطي حقيقي، وتعرضوا لكثير من الضغوط، لكثير من عمليات الاعتقال، ليتعرضون للسجن أيضا بأحكام قضائية جائرة. وتتعرض الآن حرية الصحافة في اليمن لهجمة شرسة كبيرة جدا من قبل السلطات. وأنا أتكلم الآن توجد في اليمن 7 صحف مغلقة بسبب تعاطيها مع قضايا الحريات وقضايا الديمقراطية. السؤال الآن، يعني نحن نسأل أنفسنا دائما وكثيرا، هل الغرب والأمريكان تحديدا جادين في التعاطي مع الديمقراطية في المنطقة سواء في اليمن أو في غيرها؟ هل المسؤولون الأمريكيون حينما يخاطبون المسؤولين العرب اليمنيين والسعوديين والليبيين والتونسيين يشعرون هؤلاء المسؤولين أنهم جادين في التعاطي مع موضوع الديمقراطية، وأنهم يقيمون أدائهم، وأن موضوع الديمقراطية يعني محدد أساسي في هذا الجانب، أم أن هذا التعاطي كما تروجه وسائل الإعلام المملوكة للحكومات وهي تحتكر هذه الوسائل، تروج أن هذا التعاطي مع موضوع الإصلاحات السياسية فقط لمجرد ابتزاز الأنظمة وابتزاز المجتمعات؟ نحن نشعر أن هناك اهتمام واضح، لكن نريد أن يصل هذا الاهتمام إلى أذهان المسؤولين وإلى أذهان القيادات السياسية في بلداننا، أن هذا الاهتمام محوري، وأنه لا يوجد ولا يمكن أن يكون هناك تخلي عن هذا الاهتمام. أشكركم شكرا جزيلا، وأشكر ال AEI على إتاحة هذه الفرصة.
Thank you, Hafez. Before we continue with Ali, I want to highlight that one of the strengths of both Hafez and Ali, and part of their boldness in what they're fighting against in Yemen, is many countries, Yemen included, have understood the rhetoric of democracy, if not always the substance. And when it comes to civil society, instead of having non-governmental organizations, they've established what many people are starting to call gongos, government-operated non-governmental organizations. But both Hafez and Ali have been at the forefront of demanding truly independent civil society, and that is why their messages, their precise messages about the situation in Yemen, are so important to hear. And with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Ali Saif to talk a little bit about his research, which again is included in your packets.
أيها الأصدقاء، السلام وتحية. ومن النهاية أبدأ. الإصلاح في اليمن لم يعد قضية اختيارية، بل أصبح قضية بقاء. لم يعد أمامنا فرصة ولا متسع من الوقت للحديث والجدل حول ضرورة الإصلاح من عدمه. أصبح الإصلاح قضية ضرورة بقاء حتمي وليست ضرورة اختيار. إذا لم ننجح ونحسم أمورنا نحن اليمنيين في المباشرة الجادة والمسؤولة والصادقة في قضية الإصلاح، فسيتحقق ما حذرنا منه فريق الخبراء الأمريكان في التقرير الرئاسي الأمريكي المعد من قبل معهد واشنطن للسياسات الشرق الأدنى، والذي في عام 2004 وليقدم لكل رئيس أمريكي جديد. هذا المعهد قال بالحرف وخصنا بتوصية خاصة على الإدارة، ويقصد الإدارة الأمريكية أن تعمل على منع تحول اليمن إلى دولة فاشلة، وإذا ما فشلنا فسيتحقق الإنذار الخطير والصادق والجاد الذي أعلنه رسميا وعلنا وبصراحة رئيس البنك الدولي في زيارته الأخيرة لليمن، وهي المرة الأولى التي أعتقد أن رئيس البنك الدولي يقدم مثل هذا التحذير عندما قال لحكومتنا: لم يعد أمامكم المتسع من الوقت، عندما يصل بلدكم إلى حالة الانهيار فستجدون أنفسكم لوحدكم ولن يقف معكم أحد. هذه التحذيرات الصادرة عن جهات مسؤولة وهامة تمثل جرس إنذار خطير، وتؤكد إن ما سبق أن قلته أن الإصلاح لم يعد قضية اختيارية بل أصبح قضية بقاء. فلماذا كل هذه التحذيرات؟ ما هو الخطر الذي يهدد اليمن؟ اليمن أمامها تحدي استراتيجي خطير، ما أسميه بمعادلة الرعب اليمنية، والذي لا أستطيع أن أتخيل أي مسؤول يمني أو حاكم يمني أو مهتم يمني يستطيع أن ينام بهدوء دون أن يقلق ويفكر في كيف حل هذه المعادلة. هذه المعادلة اليمنية في شقها الأول نفاد، وأقول بالمعنى الحرفي لكلمة نفاد، لأهم الموارد الطبيعية. الماء في اليمن على وشك النفاد. اليمن لن تعد بعد اليوم اليمن السعيد ولا اليمن الخضراء كما هي معروفة في التاريخ وما هي معروفة لديكم جميعا. النفاد الفعلي لموارد النفط، النفاد الفعلي لكل الموارد الخارجية من موارد المغتربين. في مقابل هذا النفاذ الفعلي لدينا انفجار سكاني رهيب، انفجار هو الأعلى في نوعه بين الدول العالم. فماذا بين هذين طرفي هذه المعادلة؟ نفاذ موارد طبيعية وانفجار سكاني رهيب. لدينا نظام حكم أفسد من الفساد، وأنا لا أقول أفسد من الفساد من عندي، ولكن هذا هو التوصيف الذي أطلقه مجلس النواب اليمني ومجلس الشورى في اجتماعهم الأخير المشترك عندما حاولت الحكومة أن تقدم برنامج للإصلاح. وأتى رئيس الوزراء ليقول لهذا الاجتماع المشترك إن الآتي أو القادم أمر من المر، رد عليه المجتمعون بأن الحاضر أفسد من الفساد وبالتالي غير مؤهل للإصلاح. هذه المعادلة بقيت كما هي، لم يحدث شيء، لم يحدث تغيير. إذن أمام هذا الوضع أقول نحن بحاجة إلى أن نشارك جميعنا، أن يشارك كل اليمنيين بالبحث عن مخرج، عن إصلاح جاد حقيقي، لكي يتمكن كل اليمنيين في تقديم أفضل من لديهم لمواجهة هذه المشاكل أو هذه التحديات. هذه الصرخة لماذا تهمكم أنتم كحضور؟ لماذا أقلقكم بانهيار اليمن من عدمه، بتحديات اليمن؟ أقلقكم لسبب بسيط. اليمن الذي سينهار هو اليمن ذلك الوطن، أما اليمنيون فلن ينهاروا، لن يغمضوا عيونهم. اليمنيين كمواطنين البالغين اليوم 22 مليون والذين سيبلغون قريبا 25 مليون لن يغمضوا عيونهم ويستلقوا بانتظار الموت. سيدبون في الأرض، سينطلقون في كل اتجاهات بحثا عن حلول لبقائهم لمشاكلهم، وعندما ينطلقون وعندما يدبون في الأرض بحثا عن مشاكلهم، هذا هو مبرر الذي يجعلني أحمس أمامكم وأقول بصوت ناعم صرخة أكررها: اليمن عندما ينطلق اليمنيون عليكم أن تهتموا. قبل عامين أطلقت هذه الصرخة وكتبت هذه الورقة التي تقرأ أمامكم بالتفصيل بعد مؤتمر قمة دول الثمان العظمى، والذي حضر فيها الأخ الرئيس علي عبد الله صالح، شارك فيها، ونوقشت هذه الورقة وقدمت وبلغت صرختي اللي سميها صرخة إلى النخبة السياسية اليمنية وتفاعلت معها بشكل جاد، وحدث جدل وحوار حول المحددات المكونة في الورقة والتي سألخصها فيما بعد. أتمنى اليوم أن أحقق نفس الغرض بأن ألفت انتباهكم لكي تهتموا كجيران وكأصدقاء بضرورة الإصلاح في اليمن. نتيجة الحوار خلال العامين الماضيين حصل اتفاق حول بعض القضايا من قبل أطراف النخبة السياسية، وما زال اختلاف كبير حول أهم القضايا. الاختلاف الأساسي سألخصه كما يلي: أولا، تشخيص طبيعة المرحلة السياسية في اليمن. نحن في اليمن الآن لم نبلغ تسيير النظام الديمقراطي، نحن في مرحلة تأسيس النظام السياسي الديمقراطي. وأنا أستعير كلمة تأسيس، أستخدم كلمة بالإنجليزي composing governors. كمبوز استعرتها من مصطلحات الهندسة والموسيقى، لأن نحن محتاجين إلى استحضار كل مكون من مكونات الحكم الطبيعي ولا الحكم الجيد، أستحضرها ووضعها في مكانها الصحيح. وهذا يعني كومبوزنج في شيء من المهارة والفن. نحن في اليمن ما زلنا نناقش في هذه المرحلة، وبالتالي البنود القضايا الاختلافية الأساسية سألخصها في 4 بنود أساسية. أولا، طبيعة النظام السياسي، هل هو نظام برلماني أم نظام رئاسي؟ نحن الآن لدينا نظام مهجن خليط بدون هوية، بدون تحديد مسؤوليات، بدون تحديد صلاحيات، لا يوجد حامي للمستوى الأدنى في السلطة من نفوذ وهيمنة المستوى الأعلى. المستوى الأعلى ينفذ إلى أدنى مستوى، يصيب بقية المستويات بشلل. السؤال حول هذه القضية ليس متعلق بشخص الرئيس الحالي أو الذي سيأتي بعده، السؤال هو حول النظام ذاته لأي رئيس سيأتي. وبالتالي أنا أميل في الورقة كما تقول أني أميل إلى النظام البرلماني لأنه الأكثر تناسبا مع الأنظمة الديمقراطية الناشئة أو مع الأنظمة التي تمر بمرحلة composing governors. القضية الثانية النظام الانتخابي. نحن حصل جدل قبل في الجلسة السابقة حول نظام الانتخابات. الأنظمة الانتخابية السائدة أنظمة مفصلة خصيصا للسيطرة عليها، لتثبيت شرعية البقاء على الوضع الحالي وليس التغيير. انتخابات للاستمرارية النظام وليس لتغيير النظام. النظام المقترح الذي تحدث عنه في ورقتي والذي تبنته أحزاب المعارضة مثل ما تبنت البند السابق، وهو النظام مركب من نظام القائمة النسبية والدائرة الفردية. القضية الثالثة وهي قضية مهمة جدا، استقلال القضاء. ما زال القضاء في اليمن غير مستقل، ما زال السلطة التنفيذية ورئيس السلطة التنفيذية هو الرئيس مجلس القضاء الأعلى، وما زال معظم مكونات القضاء يتم التعيين، فالقضاء غير مستقل، وبالتالي هذه ثغرة أو فجوة خطيرة في النظام السياسي لا يمكن استمرارها. النقطة الرابعة وهي قضية حساسة جدا ومن صعب الحديث عنها بسهولة، وهي موضعة ودور القوات المسلحة اليمنية في ظل النظام السياسي الديمقراطي. نحن قواتنا المسلحة تحظى باحترام وتقدير جيد لدورها السابق، ولكن لم يعد دورها السابق ممكن قبوله الآن في ظل نظام ديمقراطي. يجب أن يعاد متموضعته. كل هذه القضايا لا طرف لوحده، لا حزب لوحده يقول أنه سيستطيع أن يفرضها أو يقول أنه يمتلك الحقيقة فيها. ما أطالب فيه وما أكرر فيه هو أن تفتح كل هذه القضايا للحوار الجاد والمسؤول بين كل أطراف المنظومة السياسية لكي تتوصل مع بعض إلى رؤية وطنية حول هذه القضايا. أكرر أو من حيث ابتديت سأنتهي، من حيث البداية سأنهي حديثي وأقول أشكركم وأنقل لكم التحية من اليمن الغني بتاريخه والعميق بتاريخه والجميل بتنوعه وبتعدده، والذي يستحق حبكم واهتمامكم ومشاركتكم، وشكرا.
I want to thank Ali. Just one issue I want to bring out of his talk. When you're in a situation where you're discussing such basic issues as what system of governance there should be, parliamentary or presidential, is a sign of just how important reform is, because what you're fundamentally talking about is a system, as Ali also said, where there's not clear separation of powers. That I just want to highlight that one issue before I move on. We flip to the other side of the Arabian Peninsula to bring in Rola Dashti to give her talk, but before she does, I do want to highlight that while not in your packets, outside and that you can pick up is a brief essay or paper she's written, Freedom and Liberty Will Not Be Hijacked by Extremists. So I urge you on your way out, if you have not already picked it up, to do so. And with that, I turn the floor over to Rola.
Thank you, Michael. Good morning, everybody. May 16, 2005 may just be another day for you, but for Kuwaiti women, it's a day of recognition of being citizens. It's a day to our road to freedom and liberty. It was a day where we won our first battle against the ideology of radical extremists and terrorists. It's a day when women of Kuwait got their political right to run and vote for parliament after 40 years of struggle. A struggle that was not easy. Yes, we were not terrorized physically, but we were continuously terrorized psychologically and socially. Why? because radicalist extremists didn't like us opposing their line of thinking. Radical Islamists wanted to limit our freedom, control our future and our destiny. They wanted to confine our role to cooking, cleaning, and being subservient to men. We refused these extremists to marginalize us and demanded that women should have an active role in public life, contribute to society, and be granted her constitutional rights. Friends, because this is the role we thought for ourselves, we were continuously being terrorized in the name of Islam as being anti-religion, anti-family, destroyer of social fabrics, anti-patriotic, and agent of the West. Muslim brotherhoods for the last 15 years used Islam when it came to women issues to terrorize us on these issues. I don't know how can I engage them. When it comes to women, I can't trust them a bit, let alone about democracy. For a closed society like Kuwait, social and psychological terrorism is as bad as physical terrorism, if not worse. Let me tell you a personal story. I'm an only daughter, and my mother, who supports me like a lot of mothers who like to protect her children, kept telling me, Rola, you don't need this assault, you don't need these attacks. They are powerful, strong, and they can destroy you. The government is with them, nothing will change in our country. Don't waste your time. Rola, in a nutshell, I don't want you to be hurt, I don't want to lose you. But my answer to my mother was always, Mom, I love you, but I cannot be a number in a senses. I cannot be keeping these extremists to control my life and determine my destiny. I can't have these extremists to hijack the hope of all mothers for a better future for their girls. I can't have these extremists to control and limit the aspiration of our young daughters. We deserve better, and we will change, and things will change, and we will win. Yes, with our determination, courage, and perseverance, we won our first battle against the ideology of the radicalist. And things started to change. But winning a battle is not enough. We need to win the war against the radicalist, Islamist, and terrorist, who not only oppresses women, but they embrace extremism as a mode of thinking. They embrace enclosure as a way of life. They embrace terrorism as a mode to conflict resolution. We need to deepen democracy in our region. We need to ensure that women have an active role in public participation. We cannot afford these extremists, who are a minority in our country, to determine the life and the destiny of the majority and to terrorize innocent individuals in the world. Friends, I'll tell you something. As a young activist and freedom fighter from the Arab world, who's being continuously terrorized by these extremist Islamists, I tell you that our courage, will, determination, and you saw it among my friends, to change, and your support and continuous support, we will win the battle and the war against these radicalist Islamists. And the principles which Danny has talked to you about, that you uphold, of liberty, justice, and freedom, which we aspire for, will prevail in our region and the world. Thank you very much for your continuous support. God bless America and the Arab region.
The fourth person on the panel is Kanan Makia, but I'm going to hold off introducing him until we can take some questions and answers. Kanan, who actually needs very little introduction, will give the closing remarks. But in the meantime, what I'd like to do is reiterate what we said before. We have plenty of time for questions and answers. Ask a single question, identify yourself, your affiliation, your name, and keep the question brief. The whole Jeopardy rule always make your statement in the form of a question. And with that, please wait for the microphone and the first question in front.
My name is Ali Eljahmi from the Center for Democracy and Human Rights in Saudi Arabia. So I deal with the hornet's nest myself. I want to go to some remarks that Dr. Ibrahim said earlier and others about including the Islamists and talking to them. I think talking to the Islamists is a good thing to do.
In a phrase of a question.
In a phrase of a question, I think it's if we have to wait until they become Democrats, we will wait another 14th century before they become Democrats to respect women's rights, religious minority rights, Jewish rights, and Christian rights. So I think there should not be a big issue in starting democratization in the Arab world. And questions to the Yemenis here, my neighbors, they just claimed me a few minutes ago, I came from the south, so they said that I still belong to them. I got an email from a Yemeni woman the other day saying that Yemen is being Wahhabized, يعني متوهب أو توهيبي. Saudi Arabia is taking over the Yemeni tribes, paying them lots of money and turning them into Wahhabis. Is this true? Or what is the impact of Saudi role in Yemen and democracy?
Thank you. Ali or Hafez?
بالتأكيد في تأثير كبير للثقافة السعودية، الثقافة الدينية والثقافة الاجتماعية والثقافة الاستهلاكية. السعودية بلد غني ونحن مجتمع فقير. هذا التأثير متبادل وترك أثر كبير ووصل لم يقتصر حدوده على اليمن بل وصل إلى حتى أمريكا. لكن لا يعني أن نقف أمامه ونقول يجب أن تتوقف الحياة عند هذه النقطة. نحن نتحدث عن إعادة بناء المنظومة السياسية ذاتها وبالتالي بشكل متكامل، وبالتالي عندما يعاد بنائها هي ستعالج كل هذه القضايا التفصيلية. ما يهمني في هذه النقطة حول الإسلاميين وغير الإسلاميين هو ما أسميه بريسايكلينج. احنا تعرضنا كثير من الناس لثقافة معينة خلال فترة معينة، لا تستطيع أن تتلف بضاعة أنتجت خطأ، فما بالك بني آدمين تتلفهم وتستبعدهم. أنت محتاج لعملية ريسايكلينج، إعادة تصنيع، إعادة تأهيل لكي يصبحوا مؤهلين في المجتمع ويكونوا فاعلين. هؤلاء يمثلوا شريحة كبيرة جدا من المجتمع وهم ضحايا فعل سياسي مؤسسي كبير، ومن حقهم أن يعاد لهم تأهيلهم ويتاح لهم فرصة ليشاركوا ويكونوا إيجابيين في المجتمع العربي كله. شكرا.
Hafez, do you have anything?
في هذه النقطة فقط أود التأكيد ربما الوضع في اليمن مختلف فيما يتعلق بالجماعات الإسلامية. فنحن لدينا حزب يسمى التجمع اليمني للإصلاح وهو حزب إسلامي. في خلال العامين الأخيرين ظهر هذا الحزب كأقوى حزب مدافع عن الحقوق والحريات العامة، وهذا الحزب ناشط في الساحة السياسية بشكل جيد ولديه قيادات وأعضاء يمارسون العمل السياسي بشكل متوازن وبشكل جيد. وكان في أجنحة داخل هذا الحزب يقال أنها متطرفة ومعادية للتوجهات الديمقراطية، لكن هذا الحزب سياساته الآن أصبحت واضحة ومتوازنة وجيدة ويحظى باحترام كبير في الساحة. في الوقت نفسه تمارس عليه الكثير من الضغوط من قبل السلطات. فإذا ما يعني توجه الإسلاميون اتجاه ديمقراطي يصبحوا ضحايا مثلهم مثل الليبراليين للسلطات والأنظمة القمعية. وأنا أؤكد على ما قاله الدكتور سعد الدين إبراهيم، الحوار معهم جيد وإشراكهم في العملية السياسية مفيد للمجتمعات ومفيد كذلك للأنظمة المعنية بنشر الديمقراطية في العالم العربي.
What I'd like to do is take a question over there. Again, brief your name and affiliation.
Okay. My name is Ali Ramadan Abu Zakuk, the program officer at the Center for the Study of Islam and Democracy and a Libyan American. For Ms. Rola, 6 months ago, I attended a lecture by Mr. Ismail Shatti at the Carnegie. And he is one of, I think, speaking of the moderate Islamists in Kuwait. And he said he is for women's rights, human rights, and all the issues that we are working for. Aggregating all of them together as if they only represent one voice, I think misses the point. There are radicals among the Islamists as there are radicals among also the secularists. We are for the centrists who should make the society available for everybody to participate. We are against the denial of rights, and I think I would like to see your reaction for that. And about Mr. Shatti, who is one of the leaders, I think, of the Muslim Brotherhood in Kuwait.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ali. Yes, Mr. Shatti is a leader of one of the leaders of Muslim Brotherhoods in Kuwait. Muslim Brotherhoods in Kuwait voted against women granting their women political rights. I don't know the hypocrisy. He could come to the US and he say we advocate women political rights and we support women. But when things come to reality, they voted against. Okay, we didn't get their support. They voted against women. They kept using Islam to blame us and tell us that you are anti-religion. These are the Muslim Brotherhoods in Kuwait, what they did. This is our experience, this is history, it's documented. They kept telling us we are kafara because we ask for women political rights. This is what it is in Kuwait. I'm not saying anything else. I've been 15 years, been harassed and assaulted by this. I've been bashed personally. It's not personal for me, it doesn't matter, Rola Dashti. But if abusing Islam to confine women to role of cooking and being subservient, this is not Islam. I want them to preach what Islam is. Let them walk the talk. What we're saying is not we're walking the talk. This is the problem. And you tell me Islam, I want to see someone walk the talk of Islam when it comes to women in the Arab world. It's not. It's unfortunate, it's not. They can say everything they want, but when they act, they don't act properly. They can speak. I didn't see his vote in the parliament or his group of people in the parliament saying women should have the political right. Women should engage in politics. Women should have a public life. I'll tell you, we made a survey after political rights. We asked some of them, they said we are against women political rights. We asked the question, do you think there's capable women to be a member of the parliament? 50% of these people said yes. We said, what do you expect of qualification of women to be in the parliament? They listed some qualifications. Then we asked them, if a woman has all these qualifications, would you vote for her? 90% of them said no. We don't have a space. They don't believe of women having a space. There's an ideological problem. And we are fighting for it. It's our battle. We'll fight for the battle. We are taking the space. It's not like an easy thing. It's a war we're engaging with them. They don't see a space for women. This is a problem. Societies will not evolve. We cannot progress. We are a struggle of ideological struggle between modernity in the Arab world and between these extremists who wants to confine. You know how you know this Arab world is progressing? When women empowerment and the role of women in society has been settled, you know we are going in the right direction or we're going in the wrong direction. The woman is a parameter.
Kanan, did you want to add a few words? Please turn your microphone on.
A question for Rola, really. I'd like to know what the balance of forces was in the parliament when you won the vote on May 16th. Who were the forces that voted with women's rights and who against? If you could just sort of sketch that out, I'd appreciate that.
The liberals voted for women political rights. Government for sure voted for women political rights, and some tribalists who are pro-government MPs voted for women political rights.
And you won by what majority?
We won by 35 against 23.
Okay. A question right here, please. We can't hear you. If you just say it loud, I'll repeat your question. Can you? Okay. just want to intercede and repeat what you've said so far, that the question is about Islah, the Reform Party in Yemen. When the questioner had, as an analyst, had interviewed them, they didn't really have a position on women, globalization, and modernity. Please continue. Can you get to the question? Okay. The question is, given that Islah, given that the Yemeni Islamist Party doesn't have positions on such issues as modernity, globalization, women, how can you say, and that they're the largest one of the largest parties, how can you say that they can be reformist?
أنا طبعا أحكم على حزب الإصلاح من خلال الممارسات اللي عايشتها أنا. فيما يتعلق بالعولمة، أنا طبعا أتكلم عن حزب الإصلاح، عن المواقف التي يعلنها قياداته والمواقف التي ظهرت خلال عام 2005 تحديدا. فحزب الإصلاح الآن أعلن أنه سيرشح نساء في إطار الانتخابات البرلمانية والانتخابات المحلية، وهذا جيد لأن حزب الإصلاح حاضر بقوة في الساحة، وإذا ما دعم النساء بشكل جاد في هذه الانتخابات يستطيع إيصال النساء إلى مقاعد البرلمان وإلى المقاعد المحلية. فيما يتعلق بالعولمة والحداثة، أعتقد لديهم أفكار قابلة للحوار مع الآخر، قابلة للآخر أن يتفهمها، والإيجابي في هذا الجانب أنهم يفهموا الآخر بإيجابية. وأعتقد أن مثل هذه القوى الموجودة في الساحة لا مجال إلا في التعاطي معها والحوار معها. وإذا ما نظرنا للتجارب التي فشلت في الجزائر أو في المغرب أو في بعض الدول الأخرى، حينما وصل بعض القوى وصلت إلى السلطة، كانت ردة الفعل سيئة حينما أزيحوا من هذه السلطات بشكل غير ديمقراطي، وبدأت أعمال العنف تظهر بقوة. أعتقد أن من الإيجابي، لا أقول أنا دعم هذه القوى، ولكن التحاور معها، كونها تقدم برامج قابلة للنقاش وتهتم بقضايا عامة وبقضايا يهتم بها المجتمع الدولي ويتعاطى معها بإيجابية.
Thank you. Eliana Gordon.
Thank you. Eliana Gordon from the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Thank you for this panel. I will try to keep a short question to all of you, and I hope Kanan maybe can address it also either now or in his closing remarks. And it has to do with this debate on the role of the place and timing of elections in democracy promotion, and a dilemma that I think the United States is facing. As you know, we don't support political parties in the Middle East or anywhere. We do support political party training and campaign training, and someone that I knew from the National Democratic Institute once told me that her best students in Morocco were the Islamist parties. And there's also, as you've all discussed, no grassroots infrastructure for liberals in countries coming out of autocracies. Should the United States be less neutral? Is it time for us to think about perhaps taking sides and only training the liberals, and perhaps should we be considering giving money directly to political parties?
I'm going to ask Kanan to hold off on that until his closing remarks and turn the question over to our three panelists.
Yes, we have limited grassroots level as a Democrats, liberals, and this is a problem we do have, and we are sorting it out. But there is a history why we didn't have it. Okay, we have been hijacked not to spread our ideology. practically, because they knew, the autocrats and the leaders of these regimes, that they knew if we can spread this ideology, they can lose power. Okay? And they think by having the Islamists with them in bed, they can control the Islamists, not knowing that the Islamists doesn't cause them a problem now, but the Islamists, in the long run, their eye is on the leadership. Okay? US, we want the support of the US, no ifs or buts about it. Now we are fighting a battle. We don't want someone else to fight our battle. We're fighting the battle. We have determination and courage to fight our battle, and we will win. We'll win for the sake of our future, not for anything, not because of power. It's a future we want to make sure that it is sustainable future for our nation. It's a sustainable that our nation stays. Now, strengthening the technicality and the knowledge and the experience and the support of the US is important. US just keep saying that they embrace democracy and reform in the region and to take action is important to us. We've been attacked, and some of this, Dr. Saad Ibrahim and others have been jailed, and some of them lost their jobs and stuff like that. But we live with this. We will go through this. But at least when they see there is a big power behind us also, because it's important. Okay, we can't be people in a region like GCC to spread terrorists. Okay, we can't spread terrorists to the world. Okay, we have to make sure that there is a space that we contain our people. There is future and hope for our people, and that is important for us, your support. And I hope that debate which we hear in the US between Democrats and Republicans or whatever it is, it's your rights. Okay, but the message we want to get that both of you, irrespective who's in power, that you support our reform and democracy in our country. You support these Democrats and liberals. This is an important message to us. I mean, if we're fighting ourselves, we don't have our leaders with us, we are being bashed within society and been terrorized, that we are labeled so many things, and the religion is used against us in the name of Islam, okay? And if you guys don't support us also, where do we go? This whole world will become a problem, because this region is creating terrorists. It's creating hatred. It's unbelievable. The use of the religion is, unfortunately, no religion, neither Islam or Christianity or Jewish or any religion, which spread hatreds. But the Islam has been used to spread hatreds by these people who strive for power. And we're living with it. We are the first victims for it, but the whole world is a victim for it. And it doesn't work. And I hope you guys keep support. Your support is very important to us. It gives us some ammunition. I mean, but just personal support is very important to us. We know that we have friends around. This is important. And please don't give up on us because of politics. It's very important. It's a mission we're taking, but please, I beg, it's very important to us that you keep on supporting us. You keep on sending that the message you are supportive of reforms and liberals in the country.
I'd like to recrystallize Eliana's question and give it to both Hafez and Ali. The question is basically, should the United States maintain an even playing field towards political parties in Yemen? Does United States overt United States support hurt or help? To what degree should the United States embrace reformers and Democrats in Yemen?
أي مباراة بحاجة إلى ملعب متساوي، إلى تسوية ملعب من كرة قدم، من شطرنج، من أي مباراة. المعارك الحربية فقط هي اللي تدار في ملاعب غير متساوية. المباريات المدنية السلمية فهي حاجة إلى تسوية ملعب. الديمقراطية مباراة، هي ليست لعبة، الكلمة العربية لكلمة لعبة، وهي ليست معركة طاحنة كما البعض سمع، وإنما هي مباراة تنافس مدني سليم. ما نتحدث عنه نحن بحاجة إلى دور أمريكي، التزام تاريخي أمام أمريكا والغرب لإعادة تسوية الملعب السياسي في الوطن العربي. أنا تحدثت بالأمس وقبله كثيرا حول هذه القضية. أمريكا والغرب أثناء الحرب الباردة استخدموا أدوات كثيرة في معركتهم في الحرب الباردة. استخدموا الإرهاب والتطرف والفساد والأصولية والأنظمة غير الديمقراطية. لن أقيم مدى شرعية استخدامهم هذا من عدمه، سأتركه للتاريخ، ولكن ما أتحدث عنه اليوم إنهم ملزمين تاريخيا وسياسيا بإزالة وفك وفكفكة وتنظيف المنطقة من مخلفات الحرب الباردة. لو كانت أمريكا بالذات عملوا بجهد سنتين بعد انتهاء الحرب الباردة بعد عام 90 لتصفية مخلفات الحرب الباردة وأدواتهم التي تركوها في الحرب الباردة، لما كان حدث 11 سبتمبر، ولا ما كانت حدثت كول، ولا ما كان قتل جار الله عمر، ولا كان قتل غيره وغيره وغيره، ولا ما كان سجن سعد الدين إبراهيم، ولا كان قتل الكثيرين. أقول أمريكا ملزمة أخلاقيا وتاريخيا بأن تزيل مخلفات الحرب الباردة. أما بناء الحكم الجيد، بناء الديمقراطية، فالعرب أقدر وأولى على تحقيق ذلك. هي قضيتنا من قبل أن تكون قضية الآخرين، هذا أساس. لكن هل اليوم نحن كما تحدثت العزيزة نائلة، نحن نلجأ إلى الغرب والأمريكا في التدريس، في الهندسة، في السلاح، في الأمن، في كل مجالات الحياة. عندما نأتي إلى السياسة، إلى القيم، نقول لا، هذا تمييز غير أخلاق، غير طبيعي. نحن بحاجة للاستفادة من كل تجارب العالم، من كل إمكانيات العالم، من كل حضارة العالم. نحن نبحث عن شراكة مع العالم وليس تبعية. الشراكة تختلف عن تبعية، قد تختلف درجات أو مستويات الشراكة، حصة كل شريك في هذه الشراكة، ولكن نستنظر شركاء ولو بحصصنا البسيطة والمتواضعة. وشكرا.
أضيف حاجة واحدة إجابة على سؤال مايكل، أنه كيف يمكن الولايات المتحدة أن تساعد القوى السياسية اليمنية. أنا لا أقصد أن تساعدها أن تدعمها في حملاتها الانتخابية أو تصوت بدلا عن أنصارها، لكن ممكن تساعدها في بناء نفسها مؤسسيا. البنية المؤسسية للأحزاب اليمنية ضعيفة جدا، لا يستطيعوا التواصل مع الأعضاء، وبالتالي بالتأهيل. هناك كثير من المؤسسات الأمريكية التي يمكن أن تعمل برامج تأهيلية تدريبية لقيادات والناشطين في الأحزاب السياسية فيما يتعلق بإدارة العمل السياسي والبناء التنظيمي لهذا الأحزاب، وهذا مهم جدا مهم جدا. الأحزاب السياسية الآن ما عدا ربما الحزب الإسلامي اللي هو حزب الإصلاح يستطيع الوصول إلى المجتمع، لكن الأحزاب الأخرى لا توجد لديها القدرة على الوصول إلى الفئات الشعبية. هذا جانب. الجانب الآخر، هناك يعني بعض الأحزاب ما زالت غير مطمئنة إلى الدور الأمريكي في المنطقة وفي اليمن. كما قلت سابقا لم تتضح لديها الصورة. هل الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية جادة في مجال الديمقراطية ولن تساوم به؟ أنا يعني التقيت قبل ما أجي بعض الشخصيات في قيادات في حزب الإصلاح، فقالوا إحنا من يقنع أمريكا أننا لسنا ضدها، لسنا ضد توجهاتها؟ من يقنعها أننا أحزاب سياسية تمارس عمل سياسي، نريد الوصول إلى السلطة عن طريق العمل السياسي السلمي، ونريد الوصول إلى السلطة لكي نحكم ونخدم هذا المجتمع، ولا نمارس أيديولوجية معايدة للولايات المتحدة. أعتقد الحوار في هذا الجانب مهم. كذلك الولايات المتحدة صوتها مسموع في المنطقة وفي اليمن تحديدا، عن طريق تستطيع أيضا دعم منظمات مجتمع مدني تراقب العمل السياسي وتراقب حتى الانتخابات. الرقابة على الانتخابات المحلية والانتخابات البرلمانية مهمة، وتقييم المؤسسات الدولية لأنه في اليمن ربما الحالة مختلفة. المنظمات الدولية تستطيع أن تساهم في الرقابة على الانتخابات في اليمن على عكس بعض البلدان الأخرى. تقارير الانتخابات مهمة جدا، كذلك تقارير المنظمات الدولية الأخرى حول الوضع السياسي. هل تستطيع الإدارة الأمريكية أن تستخدم هذه، وهذا طرح أمس من قبل الدكتور سعد الدين إبراهيم، هل تستطيع الإدارة الأمريكية والدول أيضا حتى دول الاتحاد الأوروبي أن تقول هذه تقارير المنظمات الدولية، ماذا عملتم وماذا ستعملون لتحقيق تقدم في هذا الجانب؟ شكرا.
I'm going to take two final questions before introducing Kanan Makia, because AEI does have a very busy day today, so we do want to have this end promptly at noon. And with that, I'd like to turn the floor over for a brief question to Zainab Al-Suwaij. Microphone's right behind.
My name is Zainab Al-Suwaij. I'm the Executive Director of the American Islamic Congress. My question is for Rola. First, I would like to congratulate you on the great effort and succeeding in getting the women political rights in Kuwait. My question is, what are the plans and strategies that you're going to be taking for the next year election in terms of women nominees and how they are going to get there?
Well, if you could keep your answer brief, just so we can take the one final question.
Quick, we're encouraging women who they're capable in getting into the political life to run for election. So far, we're having 12 women who are planning to run. In an election, we have 25 districts in Kuwait. So we're planning to have women. We're trying to strategize in terms of campaign training, and this is where we need the assistance of the US so that we can have presenting a better campaigning, putting our messages, reaching our audiences. And we're hoping that we will have women in the parliament, and we're making all the efforts to get the women in the parliament.
And the final question to Claudia Rosette, please.
Thank you, Claudia Rosette, journalist in residence with the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. There are other powers, perhaps not as powerful as the United States, but quite active in the Middle East, not least, China, Russia, and there's a great deal of discussion about the US. Could I ask our panelists just to tell us, China, Russia, the sort of major powers also active in your region, what are they doing for good, for evil? Why are they never mentioned in these discussions? Thank you.
For exercise, when I was in Sana'a, I used to hike over to the Chinese cemetery at least once a week. And so I'll turn the question over first to Hafiz and Ali, but again, please keep your answers brief.
بصراحة أنا محتاج الإجابة أيضا. الصينيين يعني نحن في اليمن بنوا فقط عام يمكن 58 مصنع للغزل والنسيج، وشقوا طريق من الحديدة إلى صنعاء، من ميناء مهم إلى صنعاء، وتوفي يمكن قرابة 100 صيني هناك، وعملوا جسر صغير سمي جسر الصداقة اليمنية الصينية. نتكلم نحن عن قوى قادرة على التأثير. ربما الصينيون مستهدفون أيضا في الديمقراطية فيما يتعلق بالديمقراطية والإصلاحات السياسية والاقتصادية، ووضعهم أحيانا يكون مشابه لوضعنا. كذلك روسيا، لا نستطيع أن نقول أن هناك ناشط فيما يتعلق في مجال الإصلاحات السياسية والإصلاحات حتى الاقتصادية غير الولايات المتحدة وأوروبا. بقية الدول غير موجودة تماما ومغيبة، لا الأنشطة الدبلوماسية غائبة تماما عن هذه الدول، لا تدعم أي عمل مدني ولا أي مشاريع تتعلق بالإصلاحات السياسية في بلدانها. اليابان لها حضور حقيقي موجود وبدأت تنشط خلال العامين الأخيرين بشكل جيد في اليمن.
I'm actually going to defer the rest of the answers to that question to the next time we have a public panel featuring our Reform and Dissent participants from Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, and Palestine. Because I do want to have enough time to introduce Kanan Makia. Now, you have the biography of Kanan Makia in front of you. He's a professor at Brandeis University. He is the founder of the Iraq Memory Foundation, and he is someone whose intellectual grappling with some of these issues has been clear in his writings, not only his more famous books about tyranny, cruelty, silence in Iraq under Saddam Hussein. One of my most favorite books of Kanan's I reread recently was the republished version of, I believe it was The Monument, which was a study of how architecture and art with regard to tyranny. But some of my more fond memories of Kanan, before moving on, was seeing Kanan on his hands and knees, going through the basement of the tomb of Michel Aflaq, extricating documents which had been hidden there so that he can publicize them to the world and so that people can have open intellectual rights to look at such things. And also, one of those issues which wasn't really covered in all the reporting about Iraq because it didn't happen in the green zone. A lot of people know about Al-Iraqiyya television, which isn't the greatest success stories, at least in its early years. But as satellite dishes were coming to Baghdad, only the richer, more affluent people at first could afford them, which meant that what was on Iraqiyya, even if not all the intellectuals saw it, the taxi drivers saw it, the bus drivers saw it, and Kanan Makia had boldly produced one of the first documentaries about the crimes of Al-Anfal, the ethnic cleansing, the genocide of the Kurdish people in northern Iraq, in Iraqi Kurdistan in 1988. This was broadcast after the fall of Saddam Hussein, and just hearing about people coming up to the streets, people who didn't know what happened in Iraqi Kurdistan, being exposed to now we understand because of you, a recognized celebrity on the street, of the tyranny, of the cruelty, of just what happened in Saddam Hussein's Iraq. That to me encapsulates Kanan Makia. So without further ado, and I apologize for my non-traditional introduction, I'd like to turn the floor over to Kanan for closing remarks about dissent and reform in the Arab world.
Michael, that's far too generous. Thank you very much. And in that glowing introduction, Michael left out his own very important role in helping the Iraq Memory Foundation gain access to what we now have is 11 million pages of digitized Ba'ath Party documents that came from the basements of the Ba'ath Party headquarters building, and were it not for people like Michael steering us through the complicated machinations of the bureaucracy in those days, we might never have gotten the various permissions needed to relocate those documents, take care of them, start scanning them, and so on. So thank you. That's something I too will never forget. Dissent and reform are what we have been talking about all morning. The assumption has been, it seems to me, on the part of all of us this morning, that these are sort of synonyms. These words run into one another. And the gist of my comments, my closing remarks, will be to pause at each one of these two words, dissent and reform, and suggest that they are quite different. Different tasks and responsibilities and consequences follow from looking at, pausing at these words, and trying to figure out where we are in the Arab world in the march towards democracy. I think indirectly my comments will answer the point that Ileana asked, or the question that Ileana asked. But let's begin with dissent. And I will use an anecdote. Anecdotes come to me easily from the Iraqi experience, but it is the intention is a general one. There is a pseudonymous Iraqi writing on the internet these days, whose name is Shalesh. He is the equivalent of this country's Mark Twain. He's a great humorist, satirist, lampooner of modern Iraqi politics. We've had nobody like Shalesh in Iraqi politics for something like 60, 70, 50 years. I can only think of two names that come up to the quality of Shalesh. Habazbouz, those of you Iraqis may remember this name, or Aziz Ali, the singer who used to develop these incredibly witty songs that would lampoon authority, lampoon society, point out, look self-critically at the internal ills of society. Anyway, Shalesh is of that ilk. He writes in colloquial Iraqi Arabic, so it's very hard for people from Algeria and Yemen and so on to understand him unless you know the Iraqi accent. He has an article virtually every day. And I have conducted an email conversation. He doesn't know who I am, and I don't know who he is. But his most recent lampoon, just the other day, was a critique of a very prominent Iraqi politician, whose name I shall not mention because I am not pseudonymous here, who, however, had the decency, prior to the appearance of this lampoon, had actually written to Shelesh to say, look, I'm a great admirer of you. By the way, Shelesh is extremely widely read, and now for the first time people are writing about Shelesh's writings. So you have articles even appearing in Sharq al-Awsat for the first time, recognizing the importance of Shelesh. Shelesh is a phenomenon. Shelesh is not just one amongst hundreds and thousands of new writers that have blossomed in the last 3 years. So this Iraqi politician writes to Shelesh saying, I urge you, you're doing a good thing, even though you are lambasting this new Iraqi political elite that emerged after 2003. So Shelesh immediately responds the next day. He can't help himself. He lampoons this guy. He comes up with a devastating article that must have the poor man cringing. It only appeared 2-3 days ago. Now, however, I made the central point here is, or one of the important points here is, Shelesh is a pseudonym. It's not the guy's real name. And you can't write what Shelesh is writing without, if it were not as a pseudonym. He's hilariously funny. It's incredible satire. I mean, you cannot help but laugh at these pieces, even if when they're ridiculous. I mean, when they don't make sense, but they're nevertheless very funny. And something else about Shelesh is that he only uses the internet. And every day on the internet, he is out there with an article. And every day, hundreds and thousands of people are reading Shelesh. And not just Shelesh, the thousands of other Iraqis who are using the internet today to write in a way that represents a blossoming of dissidence, to come back to the first word, that we have not seen at all. That is a product that is truly one of the great products of the 2003 overthrow of the Saddam regime. Now, in this, I bring him up because he is an epitome of what all of these people on this panel today, on the earlier panel, are, namely dissidents. And it epitomizes the meaning of dissidence. Dissidence operates on culture. It operates not directly on politics. The last thing in the world you would ever want is for Mr. Shelesh, whoever he is, to become a politician, because that would destroy the man. I mean, just imagine Mark Twain having to be a Secretary of State or something like that. It just doesn't work. But you need a Shelesh to suggest now that something is happening in culture that has not happened before. And so Shelesh is not a politician, but he's an absolutely epitome of what we are talking about, of dissidence in a culture, of a culture starting for the first time to reflect upon itself, to look at itself humorously, critically, and so on. Now, what about reform? Reform, by contrast with dissidence of this nature, is, it seems to me, an altogether different animal. It operates, for instance, when it happens at all in the Arab world, through huge bureaucracies that even in the best of cases are slow to change in this country or in any country. More importantly, reform operating through huge bureaucracies is focused, of course, on the political. The classic example of a successful reform is what Rola just described to us. A women's movement allied with liberal reformers and others have succeeded in pushing through a historic vote that changes the shape of politics in Kuwait on a very fundamental, foundational issue. That's reform. Reform operates at the political sphere, not at the cultural sphere. But Rola's example is the exception that that the case of Yemen suggests the difficulties of. Reform is very hard. To change these political systems of the Arab world, of the Arab regimes, is far harder and far more resistant than any of us perhaps thought possible. Those we had hoped we would be much further along the line in terms of reforming the basic way politics functioned, for instance, in a country like Iraq, than we are. Dissidence flourished, mushroomed, has taken off. The use of the internet is perfect example. It's a completely new forum for dissidents, by the way, because it's private, because you can't reach it, because you can't break up meetings, and because Islamists, for instance, can't get at you. You can do things that you couldn't do before. But reform is much slower to come. Here you have to change, like Akh Ali here has been saying, and our other colleague from Yemen, you have to change structures that are rooted in 50, 60 years of unchange, and in mentalities and mindsets that are still way out of tune. So when we look at the Arab world, today, we see for something in recent years flourishing and growing at a very rapid rate, namely dissidence. That, frankly, when Michael's very kind comments about my book's Cruelty and Silence, for instance, when that book appeared in 1993, you know, I was very isolated. I felt really lonely. There were Iraqis, there were individuals who supported me, and so on and so forth. Now that book is passé. It's nothing compared to what's coming out now, compared to Shalish, compared to hundreds of other Shalishes in different forms and articles. That book has passed as a work of dissidence, as a work of somebody critiquing their own structures of society. We suddenly have a flourishing of dissidence in large parts of the Arab world. You can see it in the press, you can see it in Lebanon, you can see it in Syria, for God's sake. You can see it in the Yemen, you see it everywhere. You see it in Kuwait, so on. This is a new phenomenon. This is a burgeoning new phenomenon. But reform is much, much slower to come and still a very, very long way from being at hand. This creates problems. The problem that Ileana was immediately put her finger on was, are elections always a good thing? Frankly, no. Elections are not always the best way forward. Elections, remember, we're dealing with culture here, and we're dealing with politics. Elections, of course, are great things. We want to get to stable, regular change of elections, but culture too has to change. Those people who fought Rola, those mentalities that fought her for so long, for 15 years, in the harsh way, as expressed by her own words, today that culture has to be taken head on from inside by who? Dissidents. And so I think these two things should not be taken. The distinction between these two words should not be taken lightly. We face this question in Syria. Syria is not on our agenda today, but we face it in the very, very near future as the imminent and deep crisis of the Syrian regime is unfolding before our eyes. And we will face it in other parts of the Arab world. So I think that should the United States government, Ileana asked, support liberals directly? And what about the great big dilemma that many questioners have asked from the floor about Islam and whether or not and its involvement in politics? Now there is, before sort of even attempting to address that question, let me say something. There is a reason, a perfectly logical reason why Islamist movements are today making such headway in different parts of the Arab world. First of all, the most important reason is that they are closer in mindset to the reigning ideologies that they are replacing. The nationalist, the decaying, decrepit Arab nationalist regimes of the post-World War II era have a mindset that is closer to that of the Islamists. But the Islamists were in opposition. Within the same cultural framework, within the same mindset, they were in opposition. Naturally, they are not yet tarnished by the experience of power, and they therefore carry a certain charisma that allows them to make successes in the short term. Support of liberals, and support in particular of liberal initiatives, however weak they are, and it should have happened in Iraq far more than it did, is about culture here. It's about that culture that, as Rola put it, has been missing from the scene for a very long period of time. The United States, the West in general, whoever would support the reform movements in the Arab world, need to understand that at this stage, the real fight is for culture, is about culture. The rest will come. It is a longer fight than perhaps we would like, and it will take time. But that is where it begins. Thank you.
Thank you, Kanan, for your statement. I would just like to reiterate my thanks and the thanks of Daniel Pletka and the thanks of the American Enterprise Institute to all our participants who came a very, very long way to be here and have been doing wonderful work in Washington this week. I also do want to reiterate my thanks to Suzanne Gershowitz, Molly McHugh, and Rachel Hoff, without whose help none of them would have gotten here on time, and who helped put this together. And with that, I'll conclude and hope to see you all in March when we have our next group of people coming from the region to discuss impediments to dissent and reform in their own countries. Thank you.